It's 2:01, everybody. Let's get started. I think I'm one short of a quorum here for the West Turlock GSA. But nevertheless, welcome to the June 11th regular meeting of the Joint Technical Advisory Committees of the West Turlock Subbasin, East Turlock Subbasin Technical Advisory Committees. We're having technical difficulties today, so we can see the screen, but the people joining via Zoom cannot see us, so the camera in this room is not working. So please bear that in mind. I can't call this meeting to order yet. Sarah, do you want to call your meeting to order?
Yes, that would be fine. We can call the East Turlock GSA joint meeting to order. We have Dennis Yatsua, we have Ashley Kelly, and Christy from Stanislaus. So I'm here. 202.
Okay, wonderful. The first item on the agenda is public participation. This is the time set aside for members of the public to directly address the technical advisory committees on any item of interest to the public that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the technical advisory committees. If you have any general comments, you can make those now, or if you want to speak about an agenda item, you can do that now or hold until that agenda item comes up on the agenda. So with that, do we have any public participation? Curtis, you have something to say? He's just off mute.
I do not.
Okay, welcome to
But
the
I'm
meeting,
here.
Curtis. Okay. Curtis, did you, just before I get going here, did you let Jennifer know that you'd be attending remotely?
I did not,
Okay,
so I understand the ramifications of that. Are we in need of a quorum?
yeah, we are. We're struggling a little bit today.
I can be there in about 10 minutes.
That would be great if you can.
Okay, I'll see you guys in a few.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
What a guy. It's good, because we do have the, for Westfield, we do have the budget adoption today, so it's going to be a recommendation to the board, so it's going to, ideally take action on that, but that'll be good. So with that, any public participation? Hearing none, meeting minutes, meetings of the May 14th regular joint meeting of the West and East Turlock Subbasin GSA Technical Advisory Committees. Sarah, do you want to proceed with adopting those minutes?
Yeah, can we take approval from East Turlock for the May 14th minutes?
I will.
Thanks, Dennis. Second? Second. Thanks, Ashley. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Okay, well, hopefully we'll go back to that when Curtis gets here for the West Turlock. And then I will ask right now, maybe we'll skip over the budget adoption and wait for Curtis to get here. And so with that, we'll move right into item number 6, which is the revisions to the groundwater sustainability plan that Todd and Groundwater and Woodard Curran's been working on with a subgroup of this group. Talking about well impact analysis, project and management actions, and the schedule. Liz is unable to attend today, so I'm handing off to Iris. Iris, you're going to go through a matrix that you put together, or Todd Groundwater put together, that discusses the comments that DWR had, and then how we're addressing each of those comments. So if you could hit the highlights on that, that would be good. And if there's any kind of detailed information the TAC needs, we can do that at the end if they have questions. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Perfect. Okay, so handing over to you, Iris.
Okay, thank you. Again, Liz sends her regrets, but I am happy to step up today along with my colleague Chad Taylor, who is a vice president with Todd Groundwater. So we'll be working here today with Ali to give you this summary. So without further ado, there's Chad. Can we have the next slide, please?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
So Liz intended to give you a summary based on this spreadsheet that she had put together, which is a summary of the different deficiencies that DWR identified, the 2 of them. This is just the first page of the spreadsheet, and it includes on the left, what the deficiency is, then the corrective actions that DWR has indicated that we should take, what the GSA's response is, and then what our status is. So I fully realize that you can't read any of this, and but hopefully you have some familiarity with it. So with that, we'd like to move into the actions that we're taking in response to the indicated deficiency number 1. So I think the next slide, Chad.
Yeah, and I think I'll take over here, Iris.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. So deficiency 1 dealt with well impacts. I think you've all seen this deficiency before. This is what DWR said about that deficiency. They said that the GSP did not provide sufficient information to support the selection of the chronic lowering of groundwater level sustainable management criteria. And then they provided some more detail on this deficiency and some recommended corrective actions. This is a summary of those corrective actions. I'm pretty sure you're all familiar with them. They all dealt with revisions to the GSP. The first one dealt with well impacts. They recommended a well impacts assessment that included the number, duration, and impacts to land uses, property interests, and environmental users of potential dry wells. So that's the well impacts analysis component. The second was to include management or mitigation for dry wells, a mitigation plan, if you will, and some specific recommendations for what that mitigation plan should include, and that was what the program would look like, what the estimated costs are, where the funding would come from, and at what schedule it would be. And then third, were to revise the GSP to include analysis not just about the 2027 IMs themselves, but how they would relate to other sustainability indicators that were included in the GSP. So you've all seen that before. I think you've seen some of what we've done since receiving these comments from DWR. I'm just going to walk you through the direction the GSAs have taken in addressing these comments and where we are. So first, in response to dry wells, we conducted a well impacts analysis, and that used records of all available water supply wells. Pretty sure Liz presented that to you in a previous meeting. We saw nearly 7,800 water supply wells in the basin for which we had construction information, and we did a comparison of the MT and the IM elevations at the representative monitoring wells on the total depths of those wells with construction. And that showed that at the IM, there might be as many as 85 new wells at risk of going dry that did not go dry at the historical condition represented by the MT. So those are the number of wells that might go dry in the future that the GSA should plan to potentially manage or mitigate. The second set of deficiency or corrective actions I'm going to talk to now, these are a little bit out of sequence with the first slide. We saved the best for last, but these are how the IMs relate to the other sustainability indicators. So first, land subsidence. We did an analysis of the interim milestones at 2027 on land subsidence. We really focused on the representative monitoring wells that were close to the Corcoran clay or within the Corcoran clay extents. And when we did this, we saw that low in groundwater elevations to the IMs will not result in groundwater elevation declines below the top of Corcoran clay. And so we're unlikely to see groundwater elevations at the IMs producing additional land subsidence. We also looked at water quality. We analyzed the impacts of IMs on degradation of water quality. Here we focused on a potential relationship between water quality and water levels. We looked at wells with known construction and water quality data. We compared those to historical hydrographs of water levels in the RMWs and looked for any corresponding trends in water quality for our six constituents of concern. When we did that, we saw no clear relationship between the COC concentrations and groundwater levels. And the absence of a relationship suggests that lowering groundwater levels to the IMs, should not affect degradation of groundwater quality. And the last SMC that we looked at, sustainable management criteria that we looked at, was interconnected surface water. This one's a little bit less clear. This is a recognized data gap within the GSP, but we did analysis that looked at the impact on ISWs, really looking at MT and IM elevations at the representative monitoring wells. Sorry, there are a lot of acronyms in here, but I wanted to get it all on this one slide. The representative monitoring wells in the interconnected surface water monitoring network. We looked really at the closest stream node elevation to each of those representative monitoring wells, and we considered the distance to that stream node, the depth, and the gradient changes between the MT at the representative monitoring well and the IM. That analysis showed that changes from the MT to the IM are small at the representative monitoring wells closest to the rivers, that we have no certainty of whether or not these changes, especially along the Tuolumne and Merced, will cause disconnection of groundwater elevations and the streams, which is defined as the undesirable result in the GSP. Like I said, this is a recognized data gap in the GSP, and DWR is in the process of preparing additional guidance on interconnected surface water that will hopefully allow us to have some more certainty about this condition in the future. Now I'm going to pass it back to Iris to talk about the mitigation.
Thank you, Chad. So the GSAs, in the past 6 months have been responsive to DWR and these corrective actions, and made a lot of progress that Chad summarized in just a few minutes, but you can get an idea of the depth of analysis that has occurred here, looking not only at potential impacts of falling groundwater levels on wells, but also on subsidence, water quality, interconnected surface water. And with the latter, it's either no impact or not much or not certain. Okay, but we've analyzed it. And recognizing that there are potential impacts on shallow wells that could go dry. So what do we do about it? So the GSAs, again, being responsive, have been working hard to develop a draft memorandum of understanding, MOU, adopting a well mitigation program. And hopefully you're aware of this too. Frankly, it is a draft. It's a work in progress right now. And if I personally were to characterize what's going on right now, is we're defining key issues that DWR expects to see, while we're also allowing that flexibility to develop this well mitigation program to fit your local circumstances, and doing it in an orderly fashion. So anyway, work in progress, but some key decisions are being made, and I just wanted to lay out 3 things for you. And that is that the well mitigation program is going to mitigate impacts to water supply wells, focusing on domestic, that failed after January 6, 2022. This is the date at which your GSP was adopted. And so these would be impacts that can be established as being due to declining groundwater levels caused by the overdraft condition. Okay, so we have a date here. Also, there will be a well mitigation committee that's going to be set up. Again, we don't have to get into details right now, but they're going to implement this program as we have now in the draft MOU, no later than January 1st, 2025. So that's a real commitment that DWR is looking for, that the GSAs are, that they have put in this draft MOU. And then I also wanted to mention that such a program is going to need funding. And in this draft MOU, the GSAs are making a commitment to establish initial funding in 2024, this year, to implement the program, to have money if needed, to fund well mitigations. And then after 2024, they're going to develop an annual funding program no later than June 30th, 2025, another 6 months to keep the program going, until you all reach sustainability or it's no longer needed, or the GSAs, make such a decision. So I think this is really a snapshot of the responsiveness of the GSAs to this deficiency number 1. So I'm happy to pause if there's any questions for me and Chad.
Don't see any questions at this time, Iris.
Okay, then lastly, the status of the corrective actions is we have been working on the GSPs. We submitted the draft, the changed chapters. We provided them to the GSAs, and now we're expecting comments from the planning group. Actually, June 14th, which is coming right up. So anyhow, they're selected chapters that will go back into the GSP. The GSP also will be including this mitigation plan MOU. And again, revisions are in progress, but that will be part. So, you can have another chance to look at it when we have the whole GSP together. So any questions about like our next steps?
Any questions for Iris? Keep on rolling, Iris.
Well, I think I'm just going to roll it on to Ali.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, my pleasure.
Thank you.
Take it away, Ali.
Yes, just give me a sec here. Let me share my screen here. Just 1 second. Can you folks see my screen here with corrective action?
Yep. Yeah, we have it now, Ali.
All right. This is Ali Tagavi with Woodland Curran, and I'd like to kind of go over similar type of discussion on corrective action number 2. The matrix that initially Iris and Chad shared with you, that matrix is basically a summary. If I can bring it up here, a summary of the
She's too loud.
Where is that? There we go. A summary of the responses to the corrective action, and so because again of the size of the font and everything, I try to summarize things in a couple of slides to share with you what our corrective action is. So DWRs came back with comments that the GSAs to the tools to ensure sustainability regardless of the hydrologic
Are you
uncertainty.
looking for the POs? No. Because all of the POs are right from the very front.
Michelle from Keys, you need to mute.
I'm so sorry.
You're good.
That's fine. So we need to look at the sustainability conditions regardless of the hydrologic uncertainty and project implementation or effectiveness. So to that end, the GSAs, both the West and East Turlock, have discussed this in very detail in terms of what the perspective should be and how the narrative should be in terms of approaching the management actions and the projects. And so and that same conversation has taken place with DWR as well. And so the GSAs have concluded that we need to be looking at the management actions as primary tools to guarantee the sustainability. And then we need to make sure that both the West and the East GSA are empowered to act effectively and efficiently and use the projects as backstop to account for uncertainties, including uncertainties in hydrology and participation and so on and so forth, and should present the methods, triggers, impacts, and escalating contingencies. And so the projects will serve to offset the management actions. And so to that end, we're looking at both a number of management actions in terms of pumping management framework, pumping reduction and demand reduction strategies, and also what was discussed earlier as far as the domestic well mitigation. And so along with that, those management actions would be complemented with projects that we've discussed before, and as well as part of the GSP with some updated information and data to support the sustainability plan. So to that end, with respect to the projects, we've been looking at ongoing management actions as well as far as the Group 1 projects and the Group 2 projects, looking at planned projects and management actions that are readily implementable, and then Group 3 projects. We did look at these projects in context of some modeling scenarios to see how effective these are, and we've been working with both the West and the East Turlock GSAs have been working diligently to make sure that these are implementable as well as practical in order to bring the basin into sustainability. In order to address the uncertainty conditions that DWR has been concerned about, we've looked at three sets of hydrologic conditions: historical hydrologic conditions from 1991 to 2022, and then what we call the implementation period, which is a 20-year implementation period from 22 to 42, and then eventually a long-term sustainability conditions, which is a 50-year hydrologic condition from 2042 to 2092, which is similar, or actually the 1969 to 2018 50-year hydrologic record is representative of the future conditions. That is the assumptions that we're making. Of course, we have the climate change on top of that that has also been analyzed. To that end, the key turnaround and perspective was to look at management actions. And so there is a table 8-1 that is in the document, the chapter 8 of the GSP that's been revised and is being circulated internally to get feedback on before the public process begins. And this chapter, table 8, basically lists out the demand reduction strategies by both the East Turlock and the West Turlock GSAs, including land repurposing and land retirement, voluntary conservation and land fallowing conservation practices, and other activities that would basically constitute the demand reduction strategy. Along with that, there's also a groundwater use management framework that is, again, trying to take actions and reflect what sort of management actions could be put in place in order to reduce the use on the groundwater use, basically. So that includes allocation and regulation program, and includes some additional use fee programs and accounting platform to try to monitor that process, as well as pumping credit market and trading programs. So all of those are spelled out. Some in terms of they're reasonably implementable. Some are still at the conceptual level, but they're all discussed in chapter 8 of the document that is being circulated. And then eventually, last but not least, is the drywall mitigation, which was discussed as well, and that's also in development. Michael, I think I don't need to get into the details of the projects. I think we've discussed all of these in the past. There's a question. I'm going to stop at this point with respect to the management actions. And then, like I said, the projects have been discussed in the past. Some updates to the details of the project, but nothing substantive at this stage.
Right. Yeah, so we started revising the GSP. The first thing we did is ask everybody to kind of update the projects they planned for. And I think Ali's hit the nail on the head. We've moved from the original GSP just to look at projects. Tile floors. The original GSP was focusing on projects. How can we get additional water supply to recharge the aquifer and improve our groundwater situation that way? With our conversations with DWR, it's fair to say they've asked us to move more towards what they call management actions, which is primarily for East Turlock GSA to focus on demand reduction. How can you quickly control how much is being pumped and when and where to make a difference in the aquifer? Because we have committed to kind of turning around the groundwater situation by 2027. That's only 3 years away. And they're concerned that with the rate of implementation of our projects, it won't be fast enough. And so we'll get to 2027, realizing we're off course, and then we have to start implementing management actions. This is going to take too long. So they want the management actions available up front. Hopefully our projects move quickly. We don't need to go to those, but they want to see we have the tools in place that should groundwater levels continue to decline even more rapidly, we have a way to quickly turn them around. Now, if you're at the last board meeting, Mike Tita did a really good job explaining the program they're looking at in East Turlock, where that's the main focus of demand reduction or management actions is. So accounting platform, water budgets, pumping fees, tiered levels of pumping, all kinds of stuff that they can implement quickly and rapidly to make a difference. So kudos to them for having to do that. It's quite draconian and it doesn't come easily. But at the end of the day, DWR is very adamant that, saying it explicitly, that if you want to approve GSP, this is what you need to do. And these are things you have to have in place. So the management actions come first. The projects are a way to kind of mitigate the impact of the management actions as you work. So again, things will be focused on getting as many projects done as quickly as we can to help out the groundwater situation so we don't get to the point of pumping reductions. Yes, Juan.
So did DWR establish some threshold to say, hey, this is like the goal they try to shoot for?
Not really, but we can have a sense of the sustainable yield in the basin, and that's what we're basing it on. DWR is good at providing the big picture, but they won't get into the details. They don't want to put their name to a detail.
Well, have we said that internally?
Yes.
So what is that?
It's about 97,000 acre feet, Mike, I think.
Yeah, roughly. I think it's 96,000 acre feet deficit or imbalance in the eastern subbasin within ETS GSA. That is back calculated out of modeling that was done for the GSP. So that's the best number.
So in 3 years, that's what we're expecting to reduce.
That would, I think, effectively be the goal.
Well, that's at the end of 2042, we want to be at that sustainable yield. And by that time, we'll have more information. It may be less than that, it may be a little bit more than that, but that's the number that we're planning on. And then the modeling that Ali did helps us to assess, is what we're doing enough? He ran different scenarios, both with our projects and management actions, and then setting projects and management actions aside, just with different, brute force reductions in 10% increments. Does that get us to our minimum thresholds and our interim milestones? And, I'd say the modeling is looking pretty favorable. At most locations, it's showing that we bottom out in 2027, and then we start to go back out of that dip. But it's also showing us that there's a couple of areas where we may have problems, and we need to pay attention and have a means for escalating our activities in those areas. And that's what our plan has been focusing on, is that, you know, we have a good program that we're implementing, and it's an aggressive program, but we also need to have a means to escalate it when needed, because, you know, we don't know how the aquifer is going to respond, and we don't want to be caught unprepared. And more importantly, the DWR has said, we don't want to be caught unprepared, so you need to have a means to do whatever is necessary. That's really the hard part of the assignment.
And the information that was used for the model is pretty solid. What you guys have as far as to show an accurate depiction of.
I'm not sure what you mean by pretty solid. I mean, I think that we gave some specific performance expectations for our projects and management actions, schedules that we plan to implement different things, numbers of acres that are retired or repurposed. And then I'd say, you know, best available science was used to put that into a model. You know, ultimately, monitoring is going to determine whether or not we're in compliance. So ahead of time, you know, with our plan, we're providing the model to give them a preview, to give DWR a preview that what we're planning is working. And had the model results been different, we would have changed our plan, right? So we were using it for planning purposes also. But then going forward, we'll be looking at the monitoring data to see if we're getting the expected results and the required compliance. And if we're not, then we have to change our implementation.
Well, and it's saw that it was the raw data you guys are collecting. In other words, that it's pretty credible.
Yeah. I think what is important, what Michael both said is, you know, we have this reduction that's needed at the 96,000 acre feet that we're going to hopefully achieve by 2040. But as we hit those, all the annual data that comes in our monitoring sites, if we're getting near those minimum thresholds, that's when we have to take really fast corrective action. And we already have 2 areas that we're looking at more closely and ready to take steps on if the data comes back this year differently. So it's just showing that we're ready to adjust immediately if we're seeing monitoring data showing that we're getting close to those thresholds.
So with respect to the question, like Mike said, you know, the information that's going into the model, which is reasonably well scientific model and reasonably well calibrated, is as good as we have information on. So in terms of the land use, the irrigation practices, and the amount of water that's being pumped, you know, those are all estimated based on the latest information that we have. The key area that you know, introduces some uncertainty is hydrology, and how hydrology is going to play over the next, you know, few years, you know, decade or so. And so we are using, of course, the historical hydrology, considering the climate change. However, you know, what folds out over the next few years, who knows what happens, right? We don't, nobody has the crystal ball. At the same time, DWR, you know, was keen on seeing, well, if you're presenting a long-term average overdraft, and we're looking at the monitoring of the wells, and you're exceeding the MTs and the IMs, that's going to cause problems. So what we did was, in chapter 5 of the GSP, now we're presenting those same overdraft numbers and water budget components by different water year type. So we're presenting those for critical years, below normal, above normal, and wet years and dry years, so that DWR can also see the spectrum of the different conditions that could potentially take place in the future. So we're not caught off guard by just looking at one single number. So we now have a range that's presented in the GSP, in the revised GSP, but also is going to be used for looking into the future as well.
We have a question in the room.
Yeah, you said primarily for the East Turlock Subbasin, so what does that mean for the West Turlock Subbasin? And do we have a a goal reduction and, management action plans for Western?
Not necessarily. We have a list of projects we're working on. Generally, the West Turlock Subbasin tends to be sustainable on a long-term average. So we tend to put more water into the basin than we take out. But things that already made a difference, the drinking water project, the Turlock and series have already done. A couple of projects, TID's done a few other things. Should put us in good stead. But there are no plans at this time to put demand management in place in the West Turlock. But again, as Mike and Ali mentioned, that could change. We get a 10-year mega drought. But again, well, not from the smaller agencies, but the larger agencies have an urban water management plan. When you get those times, you do have to cut back anyway. That's the normal thing. So then the state may declare a state of emergency and we will have to cut back. So we'll see how that
Yeah,
goes.
just looking at the, ones that are marked as conceptual, so those are just like voluntary conservation acts that we might take within the WTS.
Correct, exactly. Good question. Ollie, did we cut into your presentation? Sorry, we went kind of organically there.
No. This is all good conversation. I'm fine, Michael.
Okay. Were you going to show some hydrographs or something? Is that what's coming next?
I thought we've gone through these in the past meeting, so I wasn't.
Okay, that's fine.
No.
I think we've made the point that we see it 2027 as kind of the inflection point where as these management actions and projects kick in, we'll see that long-term decline turn around and then over time get back to that sustainability point that Mike Tietze was talking about. Ali, did you have more slides or you
I
wrapping
think
up?
I'm done again. If there are questions, I have a bunch of other slides, but I didn't want to take more time if are okay with what we've already presented.
I think that's pretty good. Any other questions from the group?
Just real quick on that, Taylor, because it's hard to see from, so does each project identify what would it contribute as far as?
Correct. Yep. They quantify the volume of impact, whether it's direct recharge, into recharge, and then the schedule over time, and then that gets modeled. So if you remember, when we first started, we first got our letter from DWR. One of the things Debbie did is contact all you guys, say, hey, you had some projects. Some of you had an AMI and Mike had a water line. Can you update this? Is it still on schedule? Is the schedule changed? What's the volume? All that stuff. We put all those projects, we've revised those, put this back through the program or into the plan and the model. And then probably the big change, as Mike and Sarah mentioned, is more of a demand reduction program in East Turlock GSA. So they can respond quickly if things aren't turning around the way the model predicts, or if hydrology changes or other factors affect that. So the state, they call it a backstop. They clearly want to say that demand management is your backstop. If things aren't working out as you planned, you can implement pretty quickly a way to stay on track. Okay. Do you have any other questions for the consulting team on the GSP revisions? Like they said, July 14th, I've been making some edits, and Sarah and Mike have too. We'll get that in the draft document, go out to you guys and the rest of the world to give us about a month or 30 days to look at it before it goes to our boards, because again, July 11th, I believe, is July 11th? Yeah, July 11th is our deadline for our board meeting, and we've got to turn it in by July 16th.
I'm looking forward to the
Correct.
various agencies to adopt it, and anything like we do in the rest of GSA.
No, luckily because of we are what do you call it, JPA. Each individual agency is giving up some power to its designated representative. So no, it'll just be adopted by the.
For a lot easier.
All right.
I hear you.
Okay, that's good. But we're just another update. We are working on a resolution that kind of documents all the actions we're going to take as part of the revised GSP. And that was another suggestion by DWR. Modesto's done it. One of the basins up north has done it. Where they say, okay, these are the issues we have, and these are how we're going to address them. And these are the timeframes. These are the commitments. If we know the budget dollars, we put that in there too. So it's almost like the resolution that adopts the revised GSP is almost like an executive summary that lays out what we're going to work on, when we're going to get it done, that type of thing. They thought from DWR's perspective, that was a very solid approach to go, to have your appointed officials.
What's up? Go after the low hanging fruit and then tackle the.
All that stuff, it says we're going to go after that, but if things go south, we promise we're gonna do these things too. And they basically wanted commitments, like, it's hard because at the end of the day, a GSP is a plan, right? It's a plan to do things, and they're like, we want more than planning.
Every annual report's gonna have to reflect built in.
Right, exactly what's going on, exactly. But on the other hand, it gives us a really strong game plan too, the way I see it. And your board can see these are the things we're committed to. Okay. So with that, for the West Turlock GSA, can we go back to item number 4? Which is the adoption of the minutes of the May 14th. Oh, to say, Iris, sorry, did you have something? My apologies.
No. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Iris. Thank you, Chad. Thank you, Ali. That was very, very helpful. And thanks for your hard work on this. I think it's finally what's coming together as it should. So we do appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
We'll see you later. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, so going back to item number 4 for West Rock, adoption of the minutes for the May 14th regular joint meeting of the 2 technical advisory committees. Do you have a recommendation for approval?
I'll second.
Who made, did I make the motion? Oh, sorry, Juan, I apologize. So Juan made the motion. Curtis seconded. Do you have any further discussion on the minutes that were sent out earlier this week? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Okay, minutes stand approved. Okay, and then we'll go back to item number 5. I sent this around last time. It's the exact same thing you saw last month. Haven't changed anything. This is for the West Turlock, the proposed budget for next year. It's pretty much the same dollar amount as we have this year. But the 2 big changes are, hopefully, we won't have to make further revisions to the GSP. So last year, that was like $100,000 line item. It made that about $10,000 in case there is some follow-up with DWR. They're supposed to revise or get comments back on our revised GSP by the end of this year. And the other one is the 3rd line down is drinking water well mitigation. As Iris mentioned, we do have to commit to a drinking water well mitigation plan. And so between the 2 GSAs, we put a number together of about $200,000. So this will be our share of that. And what that will do is finish up the work, putting the plan together, get that done by the end of the year, and then have money available if we do have to start mitigating the impacts to domestic wells and caused by overdraft since 2022. There's a couple of things on that date. There was some thought, do we make that date the date of the revised GSP? We thought that probably wouldn't be taken well by DWR. We're trying to skip a couple of years because while they work on the GSP review. And secondly, my thought was, quite frankly, it's fairly low risk to go back to 2022 because the last 2 years have been fairly wet. And look at the county databases, there have not been a lot of dry wells or well failures based on low water levels. So we just have a goodwill thing. Yes, Juan.
So the wells that have to be mitigated, so the GSA, wherever that well is in that sphere of influence, that GSA is responsible for that mitigation or as a.
Most likely, but again, as Iris mentioned, we're gonna put a committee together to look at all of those things, right? So if the well is, in Hillmar way out west or something, fine, right? If we have one that's kind of like, I'm trying to think of a good example, like the Belico area, but it's just inside the West Turlock GSA, if it's in the Belico area, we have some overpumping, maybe we see that differently. I don't know. Again, I think these are all things we're gonna have to kick around and talk about, and we'll have about 6 months to figure that out. At the end of the day, if you're in the West Turlock GSA, if you're in the Denair area, and sometimes my well's dry, hey, we have a mitigation program, go talk to the folks on the east side to fix it for you, that's not gonna work, right? They're gonna look to their local agency for assistance. And so it's something that the DWR desperately wants everybody to have up and down the state. And it's just something we're gonna have to do.
Are you saying that the agency that's nearest to the problem is gonna be responsible for the cost, or is this gonna be?
The GSA as a whole, yes, yeah, right. So yeah, not the individual agencies, on a GSA basis.
Sorry.
Yeah, Carol, Mike?
There's another way to look at it as well, and that is just strictly from a funding viewpoint. So for example, the GSAs could decide that they want to keep the mitigation fund funded at a certain level. And that they just, contribute to it in accordance with some some predetermined formula, like we have a funding agreement, so we could, fund in accordance with that formula. So, I mean, all of those things I think could be considered and, we could adopt whatever we think is most fair that, allows, allows for the fact that water molecules don't stop at the boundary.
I mean, the big thing with the implementation plan, you can look at why is the well not working? If you got a 50-year-old motor that's gone and is not pumping, that's not a groundwater level issue that the GSAs monitor, that we regulate, right? So there'll be some investigation, some analysis. If the casing's failed because it's old, again, that's not a GSA issue. So these are all the things that will come as we develop the implementation program to do the analysis of each well and figure out, okay, is there a cost share required, and what is that cost share? Should it be 100%? Should it be a percentage thereof? And the good thing is there's a lot of agencies that are 2 years ahead of us working on these things. And so I think that will really help us with our plan and
What you're
implementation.
saying is when Hillmar has a real old well, they may have to.
Personally attacked.
Talking about our old wells, come on.
It's all the arsenic in the wells.
Hidden wells are right in the same ballpark.
But yeah, I mean, for Mike, I know you're working potentially is surface water in your future too.
Yeah, we're surface water, but again, the biggest issue I have is I got grant applications at the state and they keep getting declined. Push back. Latest is because of the budget issue, so they said, talk to us July 1, so I'm making notes of myself, contact in July 1, but we're trying to do various different things to add another water source.
So that was the well mitigation. I'll just go through the budget. Other than that, there was a plan at one time to do a data management system. I don't think we're at the point to be able to do that yet, but we're out of the time. We may have to start looking at updating the groundwater model. So I put some money in for that. So really I kind of kept most things the same, moved some money around between lines and came out with a very similar number. So I want to take this to the board on July 11th. So we're a little bit behind schedule. But if you have any questions or comments and ultimately get a recommendation from you guys to take this to the board. Okay, so we have motion from Juan. We have Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Okay, motion stands approved. So that was item number 5. Sigma, okay, going back, we've done 6, going back to number 7. Sigma related updates. This is just something I would like for the West, I'll bring to you guys. Jennifer is our official secretary. We don't have a deputy at this time. Sometimes Jennifer's not always around, so I'm recommending that Cynthia be the deputy secretary. I'll take that to the board. Unless you have an employee who would love to come down and help us out. I think it makes a lot of sense to have Cynthia cross-trained on that type of stuff. She's gonna
bring food and snacks.
She's done a fantastic job. Even though she's from Delhi, she's a great person. So we love her dearly. So I'll take it because it's a kind of under our I think of the word, not our MOU. But our agreement has all the positions have to be approved by the board. So I'll take it to the board at the July 11th meeting and say it was discussed here with no objection. So we'll do that.
Motion on with this.
No, it's not an action item, but I just want to let the board know we discuss it here and no one else volunteered their time or their staff's time. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Do we have anything else? Sorry. Okay, anything else on the Sigma front? Want to talk about? Is there a kind of point on the agenda to talk about things that have been going on?
Just like very quickly, it looks like our TSS well program is kicking off. I met with DWR this morning, and it looks like as of probably later this month, we're going to be installing our first well cluster.
Oh, good.
So it does happen.
Wonderful. What I'm hoping to do, Curtis is going to appreciate this. Starting next month, I think we have a new assistant engineer coming on. He's a recent Cal Poly graduate. And I think he needs some capital projects to cut his teeth on. So I'm thinking installations of our monitoring wells on the West Turlock GSA might be a good place to start. So we already have designs and specs, and we bid it out once before. We did a previous group of wells. So that's my plan over the summer and the fall, to work with him and Mike Neely in our office. So the work we did about a year ago, I talked to some of you guys about locations for putting wells in your jurisdictions. That will come back up, and we'll go start drilling some wells again. But as we mentioned, there are some data gaps we need to fill.
Do any of those are gonna have any telemetry in them, or are you still going old school?
We haven't planned this time. We're still doing them by hand, but that is the goal over time to go to telemetry. I know in East Turlock has telemetry, and transducers and stuff are a great way to go. So
Who do you guys use?
Well, okay, so we don't actually have any telemetry at this point, but we have lots of transducers. I have a couple of folks in the office that are pretty up to speed on telemetry, so we can exchange information. And, I'm sure as we go in that direction, it's getting cheaper and cheaper. And what DWR told me is that they're actually going to put our TSS wells on telemetry, and that's gonna be part of the deal.
So
we'll kind of get to see how that works.
we used In Situ, which is Hydroview out of Colorado, and it's beautiful. I mean, it's all cloud-based, and you set the frequency however many times you want to upload it. The transducers last 7 years, and if the batteries that you change in the telemetry that upload the information, you change them once a year or whatever it is. But if for whatever reason that stops, the transducer still continues to take that data. It's never lost. It's great. I mean,
do you use cellular data though, or does it? I mean, on Mike's, because obviously when I work for the city, everything's like hardwired, and we have radio signals and all that stuff, right? But out in the country, you don't have that hardware, so.
So, the only thing that you have to do, like, when we set them out in Lodi, right, out in the fields and stuff like that, some of the monitoring laws, what you have to do is give it more standby when it powers up, give it more time, so that way it makes a connection with a nearby cell tower.
Cell tower, okay, so we'll go and sell cellular data too, okay, right. Good,
It's well worth it.
because all these things will be very remote, right? So any way to communicate cellular data.
Means that you're gonna hire a consultant to go out. I mean, it's good to check, right? To just
Right.
randomly check, just to make sure that things are still within, things haven't been moved, or, the cables and so forth. But I mean, it's overall, it's
Right.
it's
Yeah, luckily we use staff right now because we still monitor section corner wells about once a month. So our survey crews have been doing that for 100 years. So they just do that as part of their
main job.
better well stuff. But yeah, changing that would be good.
Hillmore is just wrapped up the first pilot hole of a 2 pilot hole project. We did find some success, so we are going to be moving forward with a production well. Anticipated time frame on that is full engineering docs in 2 to 3 months, and then whatever the bid process and construction process takes us from there. So small light, but a light at the end of the tunnel, right?
You have an estimate of what you think your well's gonna cost you?
I don't, because we've got about a half mile about 1.5 miles of pipeline associated with it right now. So I haven't got the full breakdown of what we think it's gonna be. I know the one that we completed in 2017, which is ironically the one that's given us some issues right now. That well construction alone was 1.1. I would anticipate, a few years down the road, we're probably gonna be somewhere in that 1.5 to 1.7 range.
That's what I budgeted, 1.5.
Yeah.
Hopefully we come in somewhere like that.
That's what I've got budgeted right now, so hopefully we'll be happy.
Tell the contractor that.
It will be treatment ready. So what we've advised, because of some of the issues that we've had at well 7, we're engineering this one to where basically if we need to drop treatment in there after the fact, we can drop it in. If we need to drop a sand filter in above ground, we can drop that in afterward. But it won't be bid out with those components. It has on there.
We always anticipate if we don't need it now, that we're gonna need it at some.
Yep.
Any other Sigma related updates? Okay, so our next meeting is July 9th, right before our board meeting. 2 days before the board meeting. So you'll be getting an email with the draft documents to take a look at. Probably chapter 8's the big one that has a lot of detail in it, but also look at the executive summary and see how we've flipped things around to focus on management actions rather than projects. Any questions before we adjourn?
Is the budget gonna be sent out as well? I'm assuming it does, will be like all. That's where we like, hey, this is incomplete, we need it's incomplete.
You need it now or after the board meeting? After the board meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
No, when we get it, we need the backup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so next meeting Tuesday, July 9th at 2 o'clock. With that, I'll take a motion for adjournment. Sarah, you want to go first this time?
Sure. Can we adjourn the East Turlock?
Sure. I go.
Thanks, Dennis. Second. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Sure.
Okay, and a motion to adjourn the West Turlock GSA technical advisory. By second, we have motion by Curtis, second by Juan. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Okay, we are adjourned at 2:57. Thanks, everybody.